My friends, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for responding to my call for aid. YouTube is now reportedly placing a heavy emphasis on viewer engagement, saying that views without engagement count less or not at all with the algorithm. I shared this info with you and you responded in outstanding fashion, rallying to our banner here at the center of the earth. But the fight is not over. Please keep helping us out by clicking the like button on videos, leaving a comment, subscribing, or even sending a super thanks, as all of these count as viewer engagement and help us keep going on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support, my friends. And now, on to the video. My friends, I've taken the weekend to reflect on my reaction to Fantastic Four First Steps in preparation for my upcoming spoiler review, and as I said, we'll be reviewing it this coming Wednesday on Pop Culture Breakdown at 7 Central. But I also found myself looking back at Superman. Both of the films disappointed me in one way or another, but oddly enough, Fantastic Four's failings put Superman in a somewhat different light for me. The adventures of Sue Storm and Reed Storm, with gentle Ben Grimm and Johnny, well, I wouldn't call him a storm exactly, more like a light drizzle, left me in a weird kind of ambient-esque waking haze. And only afterwards, when I started reflecting on the Fantastic Four comic books, did I realize I'd been the victim of a theatrical bait and switch. Then I started thinking, well, was Superman similarly deceptive? Or was James Gunn's comic book movie just as he advertised, a true comic book movie? In this video, I want to share my thoughts with you on this topic ahead of my spoiler review, which should be out tomorrow, and see what you think in the comments. But before we get into all that, let's take a look at who's winning the box office, Fantastic Four or Superman. While Fantastic Four First Steps at this point can't be considered a box office failure, much less an outright bomb, Forbes confirms that Fantastic Four's opening weekend isn't exactly flaming on in an article titled, Fantastic Four Underwhelms, Superman Soars Higher at Box Office. And in that article they write, quote, Marvel Studios' summer tentpole The Fantastic Four First Steps underwhelmed this weekend with just $118 million domestic and $100 million internationally, slightly ahead of what were frankly conservative estimates, but realistically behind potential for such a major MCU release. Meanwhile, DC Studios' Superman soars higher at the box office past $500 million after previously opening higher than Fantastic Four. In a surprise turnabout, it was Superman eating into the Fantastic Four First Steps weekend gross rather than Marvel's summer tentpole acting as a speed bump for DC's cinematic reboot. Superman went from a trajectory toward $550 million to suddenly staring confidently at $600 million or more if last weekend's upset moral victory is a sign of things to come. Fantastic Four debuting to less than Superman is a bad sign for the MCU in more ways than merely this film's own box office prospects. Marvel's first family is meant to set up the two-part Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars payoff, as well as setting the foundations for a soft reboot of the MCU, with X-Men serving as the other major players in laying the new groundwork. Unquote. Well, it may be a bad sign, but not a fatal one in my opinion.
I'm surprised you feel that way. The fact that rather than being a death blow to Superman's box office, Fantastic Four's profits were eaten into by Superman is very telling. Usually, it's out with the old and in with the new in theaters. New movies kill off the old ones, but that didn't happen here. Surely a terrible sign for Marvel in general.
I think it's a bad sign for Fantastic Four, O Skull of Calderon, but not Marvel in general, because Avengers Doomsday is a very special case with its own massive gravity field. Look, I had very low expectations for Fantastic Four. Once I saw Pedro Pascal was badly miscast as Reed Storm, Reed Richards, I knew they had lopped off a good chunk of their gross right off the bat. Then, when they decided to go all girl power with the Silver Surfette, and Sue Storm took the stretch pants away from Mr. Storm, I knew at best we'd get a middling performance at the box office, and that looks like what's happening here. But that said, I think Fantastic Four First Steps is a kind of a moot point in the larger scheme of things. It's not going to help Avengers Doomsday in the slightest, might hurt it just a little bit, but any film costing as much as Doomsday, bringing the kind of cast and attention it has, is going to stand on its own, period. Fantastic Four feels like a footnote, like an ad on the back of a box of cereal. It's not going to have a lot of impact one way or the other on Doomsday, so I think Marvel can breathe a sigh of relief in that regard, but they should let this disappointing box office serve as a warning. They'd better get Doomsday right, or they are in deep shit.
Only time is going to tell how Fantastic Four's box office goes, but what if it falls off badly next week? Then will the alarm bells be going off?
Well, of course, if it drops off a cliff wearing concrete galoshes, sure, then Marvel is in trouble. But I think it's too mild to do that. I think it'll kind of limp along, too mediocre to sink or soar, whereas Superman, on the other hand, actually seems to have some legs. And I think that's how it should be, because pound for pound, in my opinion, Superman is a better comic book movie than Fantastic Four. My primary complaint about Fantastic Four, other than the usual woke shit, terrible casting, and overall blandness, was it only superficially resembles the comic books. One of the innovations Stan Lee made with the Marvel Universe was introducing conflict within the team. You never saw the Justice League fighting internally, but the Fantastic Four was a different story. Ben Grimm had a deep resentment of Reed for failing to account for the cosmic rays that turned him into a monster with a rocky skin. Sue resented Reed for being too wrapped up in his experiments to pay her attention. Johnny and Ben were always squabbling because of Johnny's juvenile joie de vivre and obnoxious pranks, and Reed was exasperated with the team because they weren't serious enough at times. But, like a true family, they all loved each other despite the squabbles and stuck together through thick and thin. The movie, however, jettisons all of that, except for a few lame Johnny jokes, which fall flat because this Ben Grimm is a gentle giant, milder than that bowl of Palmolive you've been soaking your hands in this whole video. Relax, it's Palmolive. Ben is less exciting than socks for Christmas, less volatile than day-old Coke that's been sitting around the kitchen counter since yesterday. Reed always has this shy, mildly alarmed look on his face, like a tranquilized squirrel who nevertheless looks vaguely worried that there might be a cat lurking around somewhere. Sue might have been a good character, except the baby sucks all the life out of her and all the life out of this movie just by his mere presence. God. Oh, it gets annoying. The whole thing is like processed cheese whiz in a can, like a vanilla shake without the vanilla extract, with the exception of Galactus. Galactus is pretty cool, but since Galactus is in the movie for like 20 minutes maybe, even Galactus can't do that heavy a lift. So, as a comic book movie, Fantastic Four fails. This is not the MCU's first family. This is the Waltons with some superpowers thrown in. Good night, Grandpa. Good night, John Boy. Whereas Superman is very much a comic book movie that stays true to itself. My problem with Superman was it was schizophrenic. Lex Luthor was too evil in a real-world way to be the villain here. Every time he's on screen, he kills the fun with this nasty corporate bullshit, and when he executes an innocent bystander with a gunshot to the head in front of a helpless Superman, it shoots the movie in the head. Luthor shouldn't be executing people with gunshots to the head. That's Jack Bauer 24 bullshit. He should be indirectly killing people with crashing meteors, rampaging robots, earthquakes, death rays, shit like that. And always with a sense of comic book flair. So the effect of all this was, I kept getting yanked out of Superman, and that kind of ruined it for me. But I would say that in between the Luthor shit, I actually had a lot of fun. The colors are bright, as opposed to pale blue like in the tepid adventures of Mr. Storm. Superman acts very much like Superman in the comics. The supporting cast is a lot of fun, and the whole thing reminded me of Kurt Swan's Superman run from the Silver Age. Superman is a comic book movie. Flawed, yes, but undeniable in its origins. Fantastic Four is an inoffensive, genial family movie about motherhood loosely based upon a comic book series. It's bland in appearance, the script is bland, the cast gets along but has no spark, and while Galactus was a lot of fun to finally see, he never once wowed me or made my jaw drop like Godzilla did in Godzilla -1, and that's because effects are never enough. If you want a rampage to be jaw-dropping, there has to be emotional stakes on that screen as well, and Fantastic Four never really gets enough speed to lift off the runway. I don't know if Fantastic Four will rally at the box office or just continue along its trajectory to do decent business, only time will tell, but I think clearly the big winner here is Superman, because while both are flawed, in the end, Superman treated its source material and its fans with more respect. And you know how we feel about respect on this channel. From the center of the earth, this is Dictor Van Doomcock bidding you all, my friends, stay angry.
Ha 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 ha.